it is being applied when you start developing an urban plan or redeveloping an urban area, but it's not really a spatial plan or giving direction to any spatial economic interventions. If you look at the attempts to localize views, what cities have been doing to make circular economy part of their policies and the way they try to address this or try to contribute to circularity and the circular transition, then you see especially that they focus on local waste management. Many of the officers or public servants now working on circular economy, they were first labeled as the waste managers of the municipalities, and now they have become circular managers. So there you see sort of the relabeling of these positions without really affecting what they are about. There's a lot of attention on circular hubs, the collection of the waste once you demolish something, and in terms of the demolition of housing, constructions, infrastructures, there has been quite some attention to do it more carefully, to get it apart more carefully, making sure that you reuse particular parts that are reusable. That is gaining momentum a lot. What is sometimes forgotten is that, especially from demolition companies' point of view and the value of waste materials, there is already a lot of recollection of these materials, the price of metals, for example, and some other reusable goods or materials that has already been collected and is now also being relabeled as circular. But these circular hubs, they sort of pop up in many cities, or cities are looking for places where to accommodate the collection of materials for reuse in a later stage. Well, there are several. On one hand, it is a good initiative, and it also helps actors in the city to think about the opportunities they have for making their cities more circular. On the other hand, there are lots of questions also on, well, who will reuse it, for what purpose, when, how do we control the quality, what about liabilities, does it still, all these materials, are they still in line with current regulations? And these pose many questions which make it also difficult to find a business model for all these materials to reuse. Public procurement policies are being used to some extent, sometimes on a more voluntary basis. I think there is a lot of potential to make much more use of it. Public authorities are the biggest purchaser overall in many countries in the world. So there is a big opportunity. But then again, there is the question of, well, how to define circular and how to get it into programs of requirement, how to get it into contracts. And there you need to make it much more specific. And there you end up in many discussions known in other, also in the sustainable construction field, for example, or in other quality control issues discussions, that it turns out to be challenging and difficult to get it right into a contract. Zero emission construction is another topic that gains much momentum. It's also in cities when you start constructing that there are policies in place to reduce emissions and even to get to zero emission, and also during the lifetime of buildings, the focus on reducing the emissions is also quite present. Digitalization of buildings and building processes, there's a lot of faith that this will help us to become more circular if you can collect all the data of everything that is in a building, store it in, well, for example, material passports, building passports, databases. That will be very helpful in order to plan for a new or second use of those materials once you know what's in there. Well, there are also some challenges in that, especially in keeping the data up to date and well, who will use the data at a certain moment in time. But these are all items on policy agendas that will help actors and cities indeed to get to this circular economy. But if you look at it from a more critical perspective, on the one hand, it's of course very good that they take this up, but it's still a lot about reducing impact of activities and not so much about rethinking activities. And if you look at these, if you look at the activities that are taking place in the field of circular economy, especially on a local scale, but also in more national or international EU policies, then you see that still this focus on resource loops, the looping perspective, as Joe Williams calls it, that is still a really footloose approach, really focusing on the supply chains. And of course, it resonates very good with industry and lots of the institutional arrangements that we already have in place to make our planet more sustainable in our activities. So there it's, this institutional resonation and take-up of this approach makes it also understandable that there is so much attention. From a place-based perspective, a more regenerative perspective should be considered, with more focus on regenerative conditions. And this is also where Joe yesterday talked about, and also Evelyn addressed it. And it's much more about well, what are the conditions for life, the ecosystem services, perhaps, if you could use that term. There are also lots of discussions connected to that term. But should we look at space as a potential, as a sort of greenfield or canvas, empty canvas that we can use? Or is there already a lot in place in terms of ecological values, biodiversity, water storage capacity, etc. And how we can approach our circular economy activities and our built environment activities, and also where to position all these activities from such a more regenerative point of view. That is where we need to start focusing on, and it's difficult for us yet to imagine. So a spatial agenda for a circular economy, that is what we're also in this book, what we are working on, and we will be presenting it in 6 months' time about that, in the June conference. So work in progress. But what we will be promoting, and that is also why I'm happy to discuss it here with you. So I'm really wondering what you think of it. We are in need of an understanding of all spatial needs of a circular economy within and beyond cities, and also the connectedness between all our activities, or all the places that we need to provide for a circular economy. Are these hubs? What do we do with industry? Where do we position industry? If we want to localize supply chains, what was sometimes now promoted because of geopolitical uncertainties and supply chain difficulties. What does it mean for our cities? What does it mean for the region in the spatial economic perspective of a region? These are very large choices that we need to make, influencing also our production yes, opportunities and might really change the the way we produce and consume and the opportunities we have for it. So how to get to that point? I think one is that we should start mapping, really thinking about when we talk about all these circular policies, what are the spatial implications of it? And really in a very concrete way. Well, if we want to reuse material or if we want to use specific material, where should it come from? Where should it grow? Where do we manufacture it? Where do the people live that are working on it? Well, where are the consumers? Where do the, if there is waste, where is it taken to? All those very concrete activities, they are place bound. So where are these places? We should also start imagining. So how does this work? Huh? What can we foresee, or how can we picture it? And we can start planning then towards it. And really planning from a more strategic, longer term point of view. This requires cross-skill, cross-sector and multi-level perspective. So we need to think from the very low level where materials or goods are used to the more regional scales where things are produced. We need to think across sectors. So it doesn't make sense to have circular policies, to have energy policies, to have food policies. They're all connected. And this is, I think, where especially the circular economy comes in. So it's not just about circularity of loops, of material loops, but it's also the whole economic systems that makes these connections between these activities. And that also requires institutions that support such cross-scale, cross-level thinking. And it is already complex, and that is also what you hear when you talk to policymakers, and they think, well, should we really connect all those agendas? It's already so complicated, and we're already pleased that something is happening in the field, for example, of energy transition. If I need to start thinking about retrofitting houses also from a circular point of view, well, that's becoming really, really complicated. And I really don't know how to get it across, how to bring this message also to the politicians. So it requires rethinking of our economic system. It requires to do so not only with policymakers from public and private sectors and researchers, but also especially citizens. It is now a very technological or technical discussion, the whole circular economy and circularity of cities debate. And I think it should be much more telling to all people as well what it means. So it's not just about separating your waste, it's much more. And we should start really this rethinking of our economic system. We should also consider system level changes that are needed. If we really want to go to a circular economy, then we really need to think about also the higher level systems of how we organize our finance, investment, the capital providers. What role do all these players have in the system and the institutions that regulate and incentivize the behavior? Well, this is in a nutshell food for thought for the spatial agenda for a circular economy, and I'm curious what you think of this. Thank you.
Amplified as well. Are there any questions or comments? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's start with Ellen.
Thank you very much, Ellen. I liked in the beginning of the presentation you mentioned how cities are both sources and sinks, and I think in the circular economy these sinks are also very important because as a sink, and it can be anything. It can be a building that's working perfectly. It can be the stuff we have in our house and so on. But everything that is in a sink is outside of the circle. And so, do you have any ideas about how to treat also those things? So those things that are captured and by definition are outside the circle, and the circle that we need also so much.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the sinks are outside the circle. I think it's just a stalling or a temporary fixation of the circle.
Yeah, no, indeed, you're right. And so they're not outside the circle, but at least they're outside of the let's say the active loops that you also depend on.
Yeah. No, but it is. I think what we still have, if we plan our it's all about urban and spatial planning a lot, of course, what this audience is also about. And what we still do is that we think of, well, what do we want if we are in need of urban growth or new housing, or we think about a wish list and then start to make plans and make a program. But we don't look at the things or at the resources that we have and then start rethinking, well, what can we do with the resources? And that is perhaps a very drastic point of view. So if you want to rebuild, for example, something, well, look what you have and then start designing from that. It's a very interesting design challenge, but also perhaps a way that helps us thinking, well, in a radical way, really helps us rethinking the way we plan, and also, what do we do with this enormity of the things? The picture that I showed, it's enormous. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm curious, everything seems to be GHG based to the point where right now in the United States, obviously the SEC even came out with different ways of reporting the GHG contributions, hopefully in a more complete manner. But I'm always challenged because I can't believe GHG is our best base unit. When you're looking at what you're looking at here, is there a better base unit to be used in your analysis? And secondly, if we are policymakers and we're able to implement something, how would you define regenerative in a way that's implementable and repeatable?
Yeah, two big questions, no easy answers there. I think indeed the focus on GHG, it does bring along many opportunistic behavior, I think, and instrumentalist approaches. So we do need, I think from a circular economy point of view, this ladder concept with all the R strategies of setting priorities of with prevention and precaution as sort of the first stages, the prevention of use. I think that could be suitable guidelines, also being quite usable for policymakers as well. Only the incentives for prevention and the prevention of use of any new materials. The circular economy sort of relies on a price incentive, but it's not there yet for most resources. So I think we should think of other measures to provide the incentive, and then you come more to regulatory approaches. With regards to your second question of, well, what could be the sort of operationalized definition of regenerative, I think that is something that we're still struggling with and that we need to come up with an actionable definition.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, very interesting. I was thinking about the circular economy. Does it need a stable macroeconomic environment? Because now we are in an environment when we go from one crisis to another, from Brexit to COVID to the Ukraine war. And yesterday, Henry Young said, well, be prepared. In China, we are now making many more shocks for you. So if you have all these shocks and you get inflation and you have to fight inflation, you get greenflation. So you go back to the linear system because that's at least where you know the cost and benefits and you know for sure how it's going to work. So how do you see that we go into all this uncertainty? And I don't think that's very favorable for this circular economy.
Yeah, I think all the many of the uncertainties perhaps are the result of the linear economy as well, but perhaps also of human nature and the nature of human behavior. But I think perhaps attempts of well, like the happiness index that is in Bhutan, I think they have it, to make a to really rethink also on a microeconomic level of what does it what do you need to live a happy life. And it sounds perhaps very softy or woolly, but in the essence that's what we're here for. Well, we are here anyway, but we better make a nice life of it for everyone. So I think rethinking of, well, what do you need to accommodate your life and to live your life in a pleasant way? I think if it's much more, and that is also the discussion about the redefinition of growth. Can we reimagine growth differently? So it is so entrenched in all our concepts that drive our behavior. So what could another definition of growth be about, and what could other values be that we use in our activities, or that we strive for at our activities? And that could show that it's not a question of doing less or having less, or having a less comfortable life, but a different life that might be more rewarding and fulfilling in the end. It's as an economist, I think it's too vague, this, but I think this sort of rethinking is really what is needed, and that also requires, if you think about valuation models, for example, what do we value? It's so institutionalized in all the systems that drive our economy. We really need to have different sets of values and operationalizations of those values.
I just looking at the clock, there's one more question from Emil, but maybe to expedite things, we could ask Marius to set up already while Ellen answers to that question. Sorry, it's Carol. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So well, thanks for setting the scene in this way. So I'll cover part of this question in my presentation, but I was wondering about your thoughts about, well, basically the dimensions of space and spatial implications and spatial needs. So what, what are your thoughts about that? How are you going to address that?
And what do you mean by dimensions of space?
Well, is it just land use, or I can think of land use, of course, and then